Hello, Betsy.
Hello, Leanne.
So
Nice
nice
to
to
see
see
you.
you again.
Nice to see you.
We have the same frame of mind here.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk to you today about our upcoming class, Beyond Guilt and Innocence, which is part of the NLP Marin Rapport with Self series. I know that
Yeah.
you've taken this class before. I really wanted to get a sense of your experience taking the class, how it has impacted your life, a little bit about that.
Sure. I took the class. I remember sitting in class the first day thinking, I'm not sure why I took this class, but all of a sudden I was realizing, oh, definitely describing experiences I've had my whole life. Surprise. And what I started to notice, at least in my experience, the subtle ways kind of the guilt and innocence equation or banter goes on in my head. You know, as a child, I can remember, particularly around my brother. It's that he did it, I didn't do it, he did it kind of thing. And how many years I made him guilty for all kinds of things, and started to realize perhaps I instigated something, and just how that started to play out. What's the adult version of that? And where do I do that, either in my language or in my, meaning language, how I communicate with others, how I, not that doesn't feel right, but how do I calculate exchanges with in relationships, or but mostly the rough times. How am I describing those or defining those? And what's the alternative? If we're all, if this is a human, kind of natural human thing to do, to try to have these two scales between guilt and innocence, is there an alternative choice so you're not always against something, either for something or against something? And that was the beauty I really experienced in the class, was the offering of something that didn't require that, could notice it but didn't require it, and more respectful ways of interacting in relationships with myself and with others that didn't make things an equation. And that was really, I think, really useful and really powerful, because it takes the energy out of so many of the negative things that can happen in relationships at work or in personal lives, where you get bound up and tense around something, and finding a stance kind of separate from that guilt and innocence equation frees up energy in your way of thinking and being, that doesn't get consumed or, I don't know, wasted energy, doesn't have to be expended, and ends up being far more fruitful when you're not, when you don't have to be for or against something. You can learn so much more. You can move more swiftly through things, more like waves in the ocean rather than climbing over mountains or hills or walls or whatever. And flow in relationships or your communication, or just the ease in your own thinking, is so much nicer to be doing, be having, experiencing, than feeling stuck in a bind where somebody's right and somebody's wrong.
Yeah, thank you. As you're talking about it, it makes me um, realize that it almost feels like it opens up more options.
Oh, it definitely does. Definitely does. And I don't think just by knowing it does, but in the class, they go through exercises, for lack of a better word, exercises to help introducing an alternative way of experiencing those kinds of events, those kinds of situations where you would in the past might have brought up the guilt and innocence thing, either in your head or out loud, and beginning to foster, nurture that kind of different stance that allows you to step out of that equation, and or calibration, whatever that is, that guilt and innocence equation there, to step out of that and begin to experience and notice that you're experiencing something different. I think sometimes we can hear about it. Somebody can say, this is what it is, and this is what it should be, but you need a felt sense of that. And so one of the things that's beautiful about the NLP Marin classes is you get to experience some of those, what that looks like in real life, not hear about it, not just chat about it, or maybe talk about how it would apply, but actually have an experience of it in class through some of these exercises. So when you go out of class, you can go, oh, I know what that's supposed to feel like. Oh, is it like, so was what I'm feeling now similar to what I was feeling in those exercises in class? That, so that kind of reference experience helps remind me what I was really looking for when I was out of class, and certainly more easily find that space than just reverting to the familiar pattern. I could still always do that, but I really enjoyed showing the more neutral way of being and allowing whatever is happening, and just noticing how okay I am not being guilty or not being innocent. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's so subtle about the things we think we're guilty or innocent of. Who got the right ice cream when we were little, or to bigger things like who got the right job or the right project, or in relationships, whose workload is more important or whose role in when family life is more important. All those things where there ends up being this tug of war between who's right and who's wrong. And it's very natural. It's just what we do. And it seems to be a common thing we see in movies and in commercials and in life, the news or whatever. You see it all the time once you understand what that kind of equation is and how not useful it is. Why does it have to be that way? And what is just a more peaceful, easeful place to be, even when those kinds of things are going on. And even when you notice yourself have that urge to step into one of those kind of roles, to remember I have a different option, and I can choose maybe a different stance than I would have several years ago.
Definitely. Definitely. Thank you for that. It seems to be a natural thing that we do in society that is like a built-in reaction. You're either guilty or you're innocent. So having a different option seems of so much more value and can lead to so much more for yourself and then your relationships with other people. And I guess that leads me to my next question. How has I know you've talked a little bit about this, but how has that third option impacted your relationship with yourself? Because we talk a lot about rapport with self. Has that made a difference in the way you interact with your life, with yourself, with other people as well?
Yeah, I think I'll just say this here, the Rapport with Self series is a brilliant combination of classes that takes everyday human, universally human experiences that we all face and introduces or suggests an alternative way of being within those experiences in a way that is respectful of ourselves and others. In our society, we talk a lot about respecting other people for all the kinds of different reasons. We don't spend as much time talking about respecting ourselves and what that really looks like and what in the world it feels like when we respect ourselves. And I think this begins this class, and the other classes do too, but in the Guilt and Innocence class, Beyond Guilt and Innocence class, it begins to introduce this concept of when I'm in rapport with myself, or when I grow rapport with myself, I am growing, as you say, those options or a new platform in which to stand from that says, whatever I'm experiencing is okay. And I have choices now about how I respond or don't respond without having to judge them. And I can be in relationship, meaning I can experience somebody else having an experience that's different from mine without having to judge that, or put myself against whatever it is that they are. I don't have to be with them or against them. I can just respect what they're allowing them to have their experience without having to engage in a position about it. And that sounds complex, but it's really this place you can begin to identify, this space you occupy that says, oh, I'm me. I'm having an experience. Oh, they are also a me having an experience. And if that's true, we don't necessarily have to have one that is a battery, a negative and a positive on the other end. It can just be two people having an experience. And what do we want to know about that? How is that meaningful for me, or how's my experience meaningful to them? And if it's not so much, okay, that's good. And if it is, we have a place to talk from, rather than from, you did something bad, therefore I have this litany of judgments about you, or you think you're all good, but you're not. All those kinds of bantering, either if we do them in our head or we express them to a loved one or a friend or a work colleague or whatever. In that sense, that learning about what rapport with self feels like, where I guess my experience is my own to have, and being able to own that. And even if there's hurt or there's reactions or there's sadness or anger about it, it is my reaction to have, without having to say somebody caused it or somebody's at fault for it or somebody else needs to fix it in order for me to feel better. And that kind of beginning foundation of being okay within myself, belonging to myself, that rapport really helps spread everywhere in your life. I've said this before, learning to belong to yourself is how I describe it. And if I can belong to myself, I can belong anywhere and be comfortable in so many different situations so easily, without much thinking about it, because I'm not calculating all the different things that I used to calculate about who's in the right position or best position or up position or down position. It's this more neutral place to be and be truly me, not be a wallflower or anything, but just be me and be okay with it. And I think the trickier thing in some respects is allowing somebody else to be who they are. I can remember my mom had a lot of rules about how somebody should behave. And so I often would see others' behavior through kind of her lens and thinking, they can behave the way they want to behave. If they don't want to put their fork on the right side of their plate, that's okay. It doesn't make them wrong or whatever, unlearn it or whatever it is. And so just all those little things you have in your head that you waste time on, from my perspective, eases your mind, frees up your mind to focus on other things. You're just the anxiousness or negative energies. I don't know how the right word. It just saps your energy. It really frees up space for so many more other positive things and things I can be curious about and learn about myself than having to be ruminating about something that doesn't serve me or anybody else, really.
Beautifully said. Wow. It removes the calculations.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm highly analytical. I could do those kinds of equations all kinds of different ways, would add on different variables and make it really complex. And next thing, I've occupied a lot of time, wasteful time, doing all that crap.
Yeah.
What's that for? Huh? Who the hell does that serve? Excuse my language.
No,
Who
absolutely.
the heck does that serve? And it's when I'm not doing that, just think of the other things I can do. Like you were talking about taking a bike ride and getting off your bike and smelling the roses. I'm like, yeah, you can do that. Even in the moment when it's pretty tense, you can go, this is just a moment. This is just an experience. And I don't have to make a calculation right now that's going to occupy my attention going forward. I can just have the experience. And that's really nice. It's really freeing. And it's such a beautiful gift to give people you're in relationship with. Because there isn't a name. Over time, it becomes people anticipate you responding to them as in the same pattern that you have in the past. I have a friend who always thinks of me as the guilty one, or I have a friend that always thinks of me as the innocent one, or whatever. That might not be their language, but that might be the armor they come in communication with. And when that is not an issue from your perspective, they don't see that and feel that, and all of a sudden, the armory can start to disappear off of people's protection. That we wrap around ourselves, I wrap around myself, and just allow us to be a bit more kind of graciously human, which is really nice.
Sounds very nice. It sounds like it transforms the relationships that you have with yourself and with other people.
Yeah, it makes it so much easier to deal with complexity. I had a really, by all other definition, toxic boss, somebody who was severe micromanager, like to threaten you being fired at the drop of a hat kind of thing.
Wow.
And in the early first year of the 10 years I worked under her, I spent a lot of time thinking, oh, I'm so guilty. Oh, I'm so innocent, and trying to prove one or the other, like proving if I'm the guilty one, proving that she's really the guilty one, that I'm innocent, or I really didn't do anything wrong, but she's doing it. I don't know, all those different combinations you do. And realized the only way I could survive that, and I really wanted to survive it for professional reasons, financial reasons, and everything else about the role in the organization I was really thriving in, was to find a place in her presence that was not in the middle of that calculation. And this class really helped me because of the experience we had in class, those exercises we did. I had some reference to build from and practice with her. And eventually I told her what I was trying to do. And actually, we created a signal when she would start to do something that would start to get me to engage in that kind of thing. I would just push my chair back away from the table and take a breath. And I would start to do that automatically. And then I told her that's what I was doing, was just to give a break, saying, this is not a useful dance to have between us, exchange to have between us. And it helped her initially begrudgingly take a breath, take a step and say, okay, what's going on here? What's the dynamic happening? A couple of times she got up and left the room. And when I did that, and then she'd come back and then we'd talk about it. And then it became a little bit, there would be a smile. And it was really just, we both start to chuckle about it. And it allowed us to just, in a respectful way, call out things that aren't useful in our working relationship and try again, begin again, in a sense, to find a ground that wasn't in the middle of that battle.
Wow, that actually sounds amazing.
It was incredibly amazing. And it was very powerful for me because if I could do it there, I could do it anywhere, kind of thing. And it didn't always work. Sometimes I forgot to do it. And I'd walk out of the meeting so aggravated. And I'd have this litany of wrongs. And I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What's this about? And then I start to rethink it. And then I practice it again. And the more I did it, obviously, the more rewarding it was. And it was easier to do. And I went, it's so much nicer to come out of those meetings rather than feeling attacked or in jail about something or whatever, or wanting to make her all wrong about everything. I could just come out and go, okay, I know what I need to do in terms of priorities for work or follow-up items or whatever. So it was a much better place. And it allowed me to really survive for another 9 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. That is very cool. It makes me realize too, once you had that awareness in your body of that felt sense of that space, that when you did come out of that, you were able to bring yourself back in,
Yeah.
reorient yourself and make other choices.
Yeah.
Which seems like something that you can take to so many other areas of your life, relationships with a partner, or even the space with everything that's going on in your life or the world, how you can interact differently, which seems so much more productive and wasting less energy or putting your attention and energy elsewhere.
Yeah. And it's interesting what I just paused when you said react in the world differently or to the world differently. And it's really, for me, my experience is not so I can do something externally, but so that I can find something internally that turns off that necessary equation, that guilt and innocence equation. And with that, I find a place that is more resource, more true to what I'm feeling. It's a great place to identify, oh, I'm sad, or I'm hurt, or I'm angry, or I'm irritated, with real authentic labels, even if I'm only saying it to myself. Ouch. That's far better than saying against whatever that person is, no, I didn't do that, or you did it, whatever that guilt and innocence play is, and recognize that in and of itself, those are respectful things for me to experience and acknowledge for myself, whether or not anybody else ever knows I'm having them. And then I can choose when I feel safe enough to share them or not. Getting below the reaction and into the more important stuff, that's more about who I am today at my age and in my role and my adult self, was really sweet. I didn't even know so much of that interaction was patterns I've had all my life that I thought were so effective, but were really just wasting, putting my attention on things that would just never brought me anything in back, nothing good back. But being in a place where I can say, oh, actually, I need a word for that feeling. What is that feeling? Oh, that's sadness or whatever. That's good. It's really helpful to just acknowledge that, know what it is, and far more useful than to be at choice to share it or not. And it is a basis for a deeper relationship than from which to come with anybody. I'm talking to somebody as I'm coming from that place. They learn so much more about who I am and what I'm about than just my reaction to the guilt and innocence play. Is that making sense?
Makes so much sense. And in fact, I love it. And it really sounds like it changes the internal wording or internal chatter for yourself too. What might have been very negative can be very different for you.
Yeah, it opens, it almost like it airs out the internal room that allows what's really going on for me to be seen and labeled and known rather than buried so deep and covered by this automatic reaction. What's really going on here that never gets addressed by standing up here in this battle between guilt and innocence, but stepping into a place where, okay, if I'm not thinking about that, my attention's not on that, I'm not engaged in it, and I just notice for myself what feelings I'm having. And basically it's just, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What do I feel like doing? And it really helps me go, oh, I should pay attention to that. I might not be able to do anything about it right now in front of this other person, but afterwards, I know there's options for me to take care of it. There may be something I can do right now if I'm engaged with somebody who's when I'm having those feelings, it might not be the appropriate place or the appropriate time or whatever person. But at least that rapport with self to say, it affected me or affects me positively, negatively. That's useful attention. And I think it's where we put our attention is drives so much of where our opportunities are for joy and love and happiness and belonging. All those senses that we long for can happen when we're in that bit more open place and more self-safe, even when it feels crappy. It's the truer we are, the more aware we are of that kind of attention to ourselves, the easier it is just to be human and be us and not muck it up with all the other stuff.
I like that. Not muck it up with all the other stuff. And that sounds so glorious and freeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be hard work to get there. And I think that the whole Rapport with Self series is about all those really common things and how they work together to begin to teach you where the rapport with self really can be built and what it looks like. And they build on each other. And Beyond Guilt and Innocence is such a vital piece to that, to really introduce what do we mean by rapport with self, and what does it start to feel like for you as an individual. How I feel it and how you feel it might be totally different, right? And how it feels in this early stage of understanding it and how it feels several years later or 10 or 15 years later, that can grow. And I think those are great stepping stones to a better life, a better being human life than certainly I was having before.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. And as you're speaking, it really reminds me of, even though we're at a certain place in our lives right now and we've taken the learning, even taking, sometimes we move out of rapport with ourselves and we forget some of the skills that we've learned. And it really brought me back when you mentioned the bike riding, because when I go for that bike ride, it brings me back into the position where I remember that felt sense, because sometimes I forget or I lose that, or depending on the mood, but all the different places and evolution of who I am as a person, even stepping into that rapport with self again and practicing and identifying where that might change in those different moments as I proceed through life. It just reminds me of how valuable it is to remember that and reestablish that connection within and that feeling, because that does evolve as we evolve.
Yeah. And I think that the true recognition that whoever I'm in relationship with, that guilt and innocent dynamic, is just as human as I am. And they're having they have the same capacity for the same rumination, the same hurts and sadness and irritabilities and anger that I have. They might not be the same, they might not be caused by the same things, but really being able to separate the cause and effect, or you did this and I did this, or I did this and you did this. It's, oh, we're both having a human experience, and sometimes it rubs us, it bounces off of us each other in different ways. But how I synthesize that experience is radically different than the capacity I used to have to do that, to say, oh, their experience is theirs. What is mine? Oh, I'm having this one. That's okay. That's good. And when I'm ready, it gives me space to be really curious about their experience, and without having to judge it or push them in a direction one way or the other, so that I'm better, so I feel better. Because inevitably each person wants the other person to change position or whatever. And we could do that, but then it's just going to happen again. It's like a magnet thing that keeps going back and forth. So I think that capacity to notice the humanness in yourself, and then allows you so much more to say, what's the humanness in the other person, like what's going on for them, and do I even understand it? Do I curious? Do they even want to share it? Is it mine to know? All those things, versus a bit more demanding and almost wanting to extract some kind of response from somebody else I'm engaged with when you're in that guilt and innocence dynamic. So it's a much more freeful, open space from which to experience people and life, and just to honor and respect what my experience is.
Thank you. That's so beautifully said. That leads me to my last question. We have people in this community that may want to share the Rapport with Self series, the Beyond Guilt and Innocence class. What would you tell them if they're considering taking this course, or they're curious? What would you tell them?
Are you asking about the series in general? What would I tell them about the series in general, or about
Beyond Guilt and Innocence?
Beyond Guilt? Oh, an age-old universal experience that I think every human has on some level or another. And if you're unaware of how much it plays into your dynamics with other people and your decisions about your experience in life, or even your decisions of what to do in life and how to be in life, this is a great place to dip your toe in that water. It'll, in a really lighthearted, useful, respectful way, learn about that dynamic, and you'll discover what it's like for you and your own patterns in the small group exercises and experiences that the class will offer. And then offer that other platform to step on, or to start building around what's another way to be. How else can I step out of that when I choose to or want to, and what effect will that have? So really, it begins to introduce what another way of being in relationship to that kind of dynamic, and my choices around it, and what the possible effect of that being in that place will be. So I think it's a wonderful class. It's relatively short, but it really packs a really dynamic learning that I've not seen anywhere else. I've not experienced anywhere else. And what I like about these kinds of courses is getting that felt sense experience for myself of what they're talking about. And that's the gem, because when I walk out of class, I'm taking that with me. I'm not just taking the intellectual piece of it, I'm taking the felt sense of something different. And that's really powerful, really useful, because you really can know when you're getting it back. I'm doing this stuff, but I don't feel anything. But when you go, oh, that is like I had there, or that's even better than what I had in class, because I've now developed something stronger and more pertinent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you recognize it's working the muscle too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, stated. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's such a pleasure to talk to you, as always.
Thank you. Get me started. I'll start talking about this stuff.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Betsy.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.